Have you ever come back from a ski trip with an SD card full of action cam footage, excited to relive the amazing runs you had, but then the footage looks like this? Well, it happens, and not every clip can be a banger. However, you're probably also not using your action cam to your full potential. So in this video I want to give you some useful tips and tricks on how to get better footage. First we'll have a look at the camera settings and make sure we're all dialed in correctly. Then we talk about what types of shots you can get, because there's actually a lot more options to be creative than just POV. In the main part, we bring it all together by using different kinds of mounts and comparing them for different types of shots. And in order to drink my own medicine, so to say, at the end of this video, I'll attempt to make a short edit of a boring groomer ski day. No deep pow, no big cliffs, and we'll see if my own advice is actually any good. This tutorial is based on the DJI Osmo Action 4, which is my action cam of choice. I've been using it almost daily for 7 weeks in Japan now, and it performed really well. I never had any issues, even in extreme cold conditions of below -25 degrees Celsius, and most of the time a single battery lasted me all day. If you want to pick up one of these bad boys, please use the link below. It does help support the channel. If you have a different action cam, this tutorial should still be useful to you, just your settings will be slightly different. So let's get started. We'll start off basic and then we go a little bit more advanced, so it's up to you how much you want to get into it. So at the bottom here it shows 3 things, and that is resolution, frame rate and stabilization. In this case 4K, 50 frames per second and rock steady. Swiping up we can change these settings for resolution. I always go with 4K, which is 3840 x 2160 pixels and 16:9 aspect ratio. Frame rate we can choose from 24 up to 120 frames per second. In Europe and Australia you'll usually be using multiples of 25, whereas it'll be multiples of 30 in North America because of the different broadcasting standards, PAL versus NTSC. In the end, it doesn't really matter too much because you'll probably be watching it on a computer anyways. The only time you might notice it is with indoor lighting, because in Europe we use 50 Hz and in North America it's 60 Hz. So if you film with 50 frames in the US, for example, you might get some kind of flicker. But for skiing, it doesn't matter really. Most of the time I use 50 frames per second, but we'll be changing this frame rate later, depending on the shot. Next we have stabilization. I always leave this at rock steady. In my review video of this camera, I did an in-depth comparison of all the settings. So if you want to see what the different types of stabilizations or fields of view look like, check out that video after. Field of view means your focal length, so how wide your image is. Here we can choose between standard, wide and ultra wide. Any type of skiing I always use ultra wide. Only for vlogging I switch to standard dewarp, and if you do slow-mo, so 100 or 120 frames per second, ultra wide is not available, so we go with wide. That's it for the basic settings, but let's see what's hiding behind the Pro button in the upper right corner. First we have exposure, and you could change that to manual, but to be honest, personally for skiing I always leave it on auto, so I don't need to worry about my shots being over or underexposed. However, there's some useful info hiding in the exposure settings, to which I'll circle back to in a second. Next we have WB, which stands for Weißbier, of course. WB isn't Weißbier. What is it? White balance. That does make a lot more sense. Well, now I've already poured it. White balance in a nutshell determines how warm or cool your image looks. You can leave this on auto, but I like to set it to 5500 Kelvin, which is daylight. What's cool is that if you click on auto white balance, it actually shows you the white balance it measures. So right now it says 5000, 5200, which makes sense because it's overcast today. If you film at night or inside, then this may differ a little bit, but during the day outside I like to use a fixed value so I don't get any color shifts. But if white balance seems a bit confusing to you, just leave it on auto. It's fine. Below we have field of view again, which we've already covered. It's the exact same in here. Next to it we have color. So here things really depend if you want to color grade your footage in post or not. If you don't, just leave it on normal. I think the image you get this way actually looks really good. If you do grade your footage in any editing software like Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, then you can turn on D-Log-M, which will give you a bit more dynamic range, but the image will look a bit flatter and gray before grading it. So I wouldn't recommend this setting if you don't do any post work on it. I'm using DaVinci Resolve and there's actually a free version of it. So if you want to get into editing and color grading without spending any money to start out with, then I can really recommend this software. How to grade is like a separate tutorial in itself, so please leave a comment below if you do want to know more about it, and I'll make a dedicated tutorial. Below color we have image adjustment. If you use the normal color profile, you can leave this at default. For D-Log-M, I changed the sharpness to -2, as you can easily sharpen in post, and over-sharpened images just look horrible. Noise reduction, I leave at 0. You could also do that in post, but it'll slow down your computer a lot, so just 0 is fine. And let's get back to exposure. I told you to leave it on auto, but what's nice is that just like with white balance, you can actually see the current shutter speed and ISO. This is useful when you want to put an ND filter onto the Osmo Action 4. And yeah, I've got one on right here. ND filters are like sunglasses for your camera, and the reason we use them is to get the shutter speed down, so longer exposure, in order to get motion blur, which will make your image look more natural and will also make it look a little bit faster. In filmmaking, there's this so-called 180-degree rule, which says that your shutter speed should be twice your frame rate. So for 50 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/100. As some of you have pointed out in the comments of my review video, if the shutter speed gets too low on this camera, it will affect stabilization. Therefore, I recommend going a little bit higher, like 4 times your frame rate instead of just twice. There are 3 different strengths ND filters in the DJI set, and you can check if you have the right one by popping on the filter and then looking at the shutter speed in your exposure settings to make sure you're in the right ballpark of frame rate to shutter speed. But I mean, you're not shooting a Christopher Nolan movie, so don't overthink it. Okay, that's it for the technical aspect. Now let's get into the more creative side of filming. So most of the time we use action cams in POV mode, which means point of view, so the camera sees more or less what you see. However, there are far more possibilities to make full use of this camera and get creative, which is what I want to talk about next. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with POV, and it's probably what we all use the most. It feels immersive and you or the viewer can relive the run. The only thing you need to be aware of is because the image is so wide, without any other subjects in the frame, your footage will probably look kind of slow and boring. If on the other hand you ski tight trees or shoot, then it'll be the opposite and your run might even seem faster and more exciting than it actually was. So with POV you're just filming your run, but you can make it more exciting by filming your ski or snowboard buddy by doing a follow cam. Try to stay relatively close or he or she will become too small in the frame because of the wide angle. And of course you can switch this around and give the camera to your friend so you yourself are in the shot. No friends? No problem. Just film yourself, which brings us to the next type of shot, the beloved selfie. Here you'll be the main object in the shot, and I'll talk more about it in the part about mounts, how and when this shot makes sense. But before, I'd like to mention one more type of shot, and that is time-lapse. There's a built-in time-lapse function in this camera with some presets like crowds, clouds or sunset, and you can also customize it if you want. And I forgot to mention, in the time-lapse menu you can switch between time-lapse and hyperlapse. Time-lapse is when you have a static shot, so filming crowds or clouds from one position. But if you're moving yourself, like if you are on a chairlift for example, then you want to change it to hyperlapse. Okay, let's bring it all together and talk about different types of mounts. On the DJI website you can find a wide selection of mounts you can order. Chances are you already have some mounts at home that you could use as well. If you like to switch a lot between different types of mounts, I recommend ordering a couple extra magnetic quick release adapter mounts. This way you can change camera positions in a matter of seconds. In the adventure combo, which is what I recommend for skiers and snowboarders, there are 2 of them already included. It also comes with a helmet mount, which is probably the most popular one and what we all use the most. I like to have mine somewhere between the middle and the front of the helmet. If it's too far forward, it makes it a little bit top heavy, which can be annoying in bumpy terrain or when you do jumps. If you have it too far back, on the other hand, your helmet might get into the frame. As for the right angle, I like to have all of the run and the ski tips in it. I know some people prefer to have more of their legs in it, so up to you really. And of course, this mount is great for POV and follow cam. You can also do a backwards follow cam, so a lead cam, I guess. But you'll have to add some kind of extension to make it work, or half of the frame will be your helmet. My settings for the helmet mount are 4K, 50 frames per second, in case I do want to slow it down later for some reason, rock steady and ultra wide. If you don't use a helmet, you could wear a head strap or backpack shoulder strap. To be honest, I can't recommend either of these because the head strap is kinda annoying and easy to lose if you crash. Yeah, I mean it does work, I just don't really like it much. The shoulder strap, which goes around the top of your backpack, is a little bit better. However, it's a bit hard to get the angle right, as your body position can change a lot during the run, depending on the terrain. I think this mount makes more sense for something like hiking. If you use a chest mount, or Chesty for short, it's kind of a 2-person job to get these on. If you use a chest mount, you'll have the same problem to get the angle right. What's cool about the chest mount though is that it's a little bit lower over the ground, so it will make your run look a little bit faster, and your hands will also be in the shot, which is also nice because it gives you an extra reference point in addition to your skis or board. However, for snowboarders, it probably doesn't work that well because of the way your torso is angled. So more of a skier kind of thing. Also included in the adventure combo is the 1.5 meter extension rod. Basically a selfie stick really, but you can also use it to do follow cam. Doop. When using it as a selfie stick, it's especially great on deep POW days when you get face shots. Same settings as with POV, except that you might want to set the frame rate to 100 or 120 in order to get some nice slow-mo when the snow goes over your head. And of course, the stick is also great for some quick vlogging on the chairlift. Hello! The only problem for skiers is that you'll have to carry both your ski poles in the other hand, which is why I came up with this construction. This way you also don't have to take the extension rod from your backpack and you have one pole in each hand as usual. The only tricky bit is to keep your pole and camera somewhat level, especially in difficult terrain, but you'll get used to it. And you can also use it for vlogging. Again, the next mount I want to show you isn't really a mount because, you know, you could just hold the camera in your hand.
I knew at the moment I set eyes on you. You're a genius.
Now, why would you want to do that? Well, it's actually great if you're filming someone else doing a flyby or a jump. Because the lens is so wide, you'll need to get as close to the action as possible. Therefore, it makes sense to change the field of view to standard and use the highest frame rate possible. And last, you could mount the Osmo Action 4 directly to your ski or board by using an adhesive mount, like this one, or by using a suction cup, which I haven't tried before. And obviously this mount makes no sense in deep POW as the camera will be covered in snow within like 2 seconds. But for groomers, this can be a great option to get an unusual angle. So this was my advice on how to get the most out of the Osmo Action 4. As promised, here's my short edit of a very average ski day. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, and always remember your WB. Cheers.